All right, everyone, welcome back. We're going to take a look now at improving, right, sort of the visuals that are our charts. So this involves trying to leverage that Z-shaped scan that we talked about in class and leverage those Gestalt principles like similarity and proximity to make things kind of go together and seem more visually cohesive. So frequently something that we can do that starts off with making something more visually cohesive is getting rid of the zigzagging people need to do to read a graph like this. Even something as relatively simple as this graph. One, we probably don't need a legend for something like this graph. We can probably just put the information in the title that we need. Something like pass rates by gender. Ideally, we probably want to write the title on the right. It's nicer, but I'll let you go either way. It's nicer for the Z-shaped scan. So let's go ahead and take a look at what we can do to simplify further our graph. One thing we want to do is get rid of all these axes and directly label our data. We can ask Excel to directly label our data, so let's go ahead and put it, where do we want it? Right? So we went up here into our add chart element, and one of the things that we can do are data labels, and we're going to put them, I don't know, let's say inside ends. Yay! We have our percentages here, our pass rates. They're not very pretty, so we can go back here to home, where we might want to make them bigger, like, let's see what happens with 11. Nice, 11 looks prettier, maybe even 14. Cool. And let's make them a better color. The black is kind of ugly, and especially in these bright orange bars. The white looks better, I think. All right, some other things we can do to make our graphs prettier. Since we've already directly labeled them, we don't need the left axis. We just hit delete. We're going to do the same once we get these little crossbars here. We don't need that either. We probably don't even need the bottom axis bar. To get rid of that, we click on the axis. We come over here, and in our axis options, we go to this little hat thing. Line and no line should make it go away. Did we make it go away? Yay, it went away. We can similarly delete our legend. And go ahead and go back here to our options. A final thing we might want to take a look at is we might want to go and adjust the size of our bars a little bit, which is going to be here in our series options and our gap width. Right now it's at 219%. I think that might be a bit much. So let's see if we can, that might be a bit wide. Let's give it a little less, something like that. We can also shrink our graph, which will kind of move things a bit tighter. And I think we have a better looking graph. We might also want to make these, change these, go back here to our text and make them a little bigger. I might not want to keep, going back to that little paint icon, I might not want to keep the orange color. Maybe that's a bit bright. Maybe we'll make it a blue graph. Maybe to keep all things a little subtle, we'll make our text here blue as well. A little dark. It's too dark. Something like that. We can change it here as well in the text options box over here. And with that, I think we have a better looking graph. That should be a little bigger too. So in order to make it a better looking graph, we've used direct labeling. That's that proximity principle. When you can, it keeps things simpler. We have given our things a meaningful title, which keeps things in the Z-shaped scan that are meaningful. We've gotten rid of all the junk that distracts us from the message. We've gotten rid of the axes, we've gotten rid of crossbars, and what we're left with is something that tells the story simply and directly. When we made the colors a little more relaxing, because too much orange is just a little too stressful, especially for midterm season. All right, if we want to come up here and make some similar improvements on our horizontal bar chart, let's go ahead and we can go to chart design. We can add our data labels here as well. Let's try them in the centers. We put it in. Obviously, we probably don't need them for both, given that this is a simple graph, but just as a kind of keeping things simple. Let's make that white text and make it bigger so someone could actually read it. And there at our home screen. Once we've done that, we can get rid of this junk. We can get rid of that junk. We're going to make that bigger like we did before. Again, back to like maybe somebody could actually read our graph. We're going to go here to our text options. And I don't like that our text is aligned super nicely. At any rate, some things you can do here in the text options. You can change the direction of the text, change how the text box looks. I'll live with it. All right, now we have this ugly legend down here at the bottom. One choice might be to, at the very least, and I'd really like to get rid of going back to that. The line now looks really weird. So if we go back to axis options, we're going to go back here to that little paint thing, and we're going to tell it we want no line. Because really, what does the line accomplish for us? All right, so now that we've done that, we probably want to move our chart title over as well. We'll give it a meaningful title in a minute. And one way we might address, right, I actually like chart title about here. One way we might address the legend is to put it here. It's at least better if it's here. We also talked about that one solution that also is nicer in the legend is if you can go and make your text match the legend, it looks a little tidier. You might want to make it actually bigger so that if you're going to have to look at it, it at least stands out. Right? It's a little more readable. And I think that's a nicer looking legend. Our chart title, we're going to give it something meaningful like pass, fail, rates by gender. Maybe we'll make that bigger too. Maybe we'll make these a little smaller. It's a little much, right? Um, and so with that, again, I think we have a much better chart. We've gotten rid of all the junk. We've used similarity, adding that color that kind of matches in our legend so that things are a little tidier. Let's align those a little nicer. Right? Gets the Z-shaped scan. You see that legend up front. It really sticks out with what color goes with what. I'm not sure I really like that pass is orange and blue is fail, so I could come back over here again and go into that, take my data series, click on just the data series. Give me both. Go in here and say, you know what? Maybe fail is the thing we should make orange. Let's make fail stand out, and let's make pass a little lighter. I'm going to have to go back up here and manually fix my text because Excel can't read my mind. I always make the text a little darker blue than what the bars are because I find that the text doesn't stand out as much if you don't. Another thing you might want to do is add to your bars. I think it makes them pop a little bit, especially with these kinds of bars. I like to add a little border. So I come back over here to the little paint. I tell it I want a border. I want a solid line border in white. And that gives it a little bit of separation. We're going to do it over there or else they'll be a different size. So we're going to click that one as well so that they look symmetrical. And I get a tidier looking image. Kind of like we talked about before, I want to go back to my data series. And on series options, I'd like to change the gap width. So I want to reduce that a little bit and make these a little fatter so that they kind of move a little closer together. Anyway, because I think they look a little better, taking up a little bit more of the space in our graph. Anyway, those are some improvements I think I would make to this graph. We can go now and I think visit and make some similar improvements to our line or slope graphs. So here we have our line graphs. Let's just mess with our line graph. Direct labeling. If I go to, let's see, chart design and add chart elements, I can add data labels here, just like I did before. Come on. There we go. Don't know why I took more data label options today. I think this is too many data points. I don't think you're going to want to label all of your data points. So here's what I tend to do. I tend to delete a whole bunch of them. This is a manual process. If what I really care about is, let's say, the start and the finish, I'm just going to keep those two. I also don't like that it wants them to be in different places, so I'm going to put them right on top of these data points. Part of that's because I'm going to do some direct labeling here in a minute, so I'm going to want to get rid of other stuff. You can keep some other ones, right? This is just for simplicity's sake. We're getting rid of a lot of them. So let's make these also blue because they go with this blue line. Remember that use the slightly darker color technique. This line isn't quite that dark, but we'll go with a slightly darker color for the percentages. And I'm gonna go ahead and put my meaningful title. Pass rates by cohort. Like it there. I'm going to get rid of that because we've already labeled things. All right. So we've already simplified things quite a lot. Somehow with line graphs, I kind of like to keep some kind of line going down there. There are some choices you have when we take a look. All right, something else we might want to do is we might want to change how the dates appear on this bottom axis. So in this case, it doesn't really bother me that there are so many dates, but perhaps we want to change that. We would go here under Axis Options. Again, we would click on that little data thing, and we would go to our labels. And instead of the interval unit being 1, we could make that something like an interval unit of 2, which would then spread out our dates a little more. I'm not sure in this case that's very helpful, but it's something that can sometimes help right, in some cases. Perhaps since this is a 7-year one, we could just put 7 years, which would give us our start date and our end date there along the bottom axis, which might be tidier. We could, if we wanted, make it no line. The line doesn't really bother me here, but we can do that. We can also make this text a little bigger so you can actually read it. And that's cleaned up our graph quite a bit. I actually want to kind of make this slightly smaller and do a little bit more. We might want to, depending on our graph. Again, this one's a fairly simple graph, so perhaps it's not so necessary, but I thought I'd show you how to do it, is that if you want to direct label this line, right? We don't have a legend. We only have one line here, but if we had more than one line, we might want some labeling. So here are some. So to make this work, we're simply going to have to brute force this. A text. And we're going to just put a text box here. I do this in graphs a lot, sometimes even for labeling data. If, you know, like I eventually hadn't gotten that to work, I would have done that there too. Come on, little text box. Did you just get lost? Okay. And we're going to say that this is pass rate. Make it a little wider. And make the text in here that same color blue so that we can use that proximity and similarity and put it right here by the line. And so if I were feeling compelled to add a legend, at least I would have that information direct labeled. I don't think we need it here because there's not a lot of information, but that would be how you do it if you wanted to add some piece of that information. Now you can decide that because this, right, again, so if we're doing bar charts, non-zero baseline is kind of wrong. If we're going to do it here, I'm not entirely opposed to a non-zero baseline. So that's another thing to think about. If you feel like this is a little tall in the chart, in sort of chart size, we can also just shrink it up and shrink down our total chart. That's going to make our text box not be in the right spot. So Excel doesn't know how to move that. It moved our data markers because they're kind of connected to the graph, but those text boxes are pesky and you're going to have to adjust and fix them yourselves if you use them to label your graphs. Anyway, I think that's a better graph. We can do more things. You can mess with the line itself. You can make it heavier, right? Since we've gotten rid of so much stuff, maybe we want a heavier line. Maybe we want slightly larger labels. They're kind of tiny. Right? We can do some things to finagle to make our graph a little better. But those are the basics of working with a line graph. And we could do similar things with a slope graph as well. All right. So thanks everybody. We've, I think, improved some visuals. I look forward to seeing the beautiful graphs that you all make, and